Penguin Random House Audio presents The Extraordinary Journey of the Fakir Who Got Trapped in an Ikea Wardrobe by Romain Puertolas, translated from the French by Sam Taylor. Read for you by Julian Rhind-Tutt.
A heart is a little bit like a large wardrobe. Ajatashatru Oghash Ratod. France. The first word spoken by the Indian man Ajatashatru Oghash Ratod upon his arrival in France was, oddly enough, a Swedish word. Ikea. That was what he said in a quiet voice. Having pronounced this word, he shut the door of the old red Mercedes and waited, his hands resting on his silky knees like a well-behaved child. The taxi driver, who was not sure he had heard correctly, turned round to face his customer, making the little wooden beads of his seat cover creak as he did so. On the back seat of his car sat a middle-aged man, tall, thin, and gnarled like a tree, with an olive-skinned face and a huge moustache. Pockmarks, the consequence of chronic acne, sprinkled his hollow cheeks. There were several rings in his ears and his lips, as if he wished to be able to zip them up after use. Oh, what a clever system, thought Gustave Palourde, seeing in this Indian zip idea the perfect remedy for his wife's incessant chattering. The man's grey and shiny silk suit, his red tie, which he had not even bothered to knot but had simply pinned on, and his white shirt, all terribly creased, suggested he had been on a long flight. Strangely, however, he had no luggage. Either he's a Hindu or he's suffered a very serious head injury, the driver thought when he considered the large white turban that encircled his customer's head. The olive-skinned face and the huge moustache made him lean towards the first of these theories. Ikea? Ikea, the Indian repeated, elongating the last vowel. Which one? He asked, in French. Then, in stuttering English, what Ikea? Gustave was as comfortable speaking English as a dog on ice skates. The passenger shrugged, as if to suggest that he couldn't care less. Just Ikea, he said. Doesn't matter the one that best suits you as a Parisian. This is more or less what the driver heard, a series of incomprehensible babbling noises. But, babbling or otherwise, this was the first time in his 30 years spent working for gypsy taxis that a customer coming out of Terminal 2C of Charles de Gaulle Airport had asked to be taken to a furniture store. As far as he was aware, Ikea had not recently opened a chain of hotels. Gustave had heard some unusual requests before, but this one took the biscuit. If this guy had really come from India, then he had paid a small fortune and spent 8 hours in an aeroplane in order to buy Billy shelves or a Poang chair. Crikey. It was incredible, really. He had to write this encounter down in his guest book, between Demis Roussos and Salman Rushdie, both of whom had once done him the honour of placing their noble posteriors on the leopard-skin seats of his taxi. He also had to remember to tell the story to his wife that evening during dinner. As he generally had nothing to say, it was his wife, whose luscious lips were not yet equipped with a clever Indian zip system, who monopolised the mealtime conversation, while their daughter sent misspelt texts to other young people who did not even know how to read. This would change things a little, for once. OK. The gypsy taxi driver, who had spent his last 3 weekends roaming the blue and yellow corridors of the Swedish store with the 2 aforementioned ladies in order to furnish the new family caravan, knew perfectly well that the closest Ikea was the one in Roissy-Paris Nord, a mere €8.25 ride away. So he set his sights on the one in Paris-Sud-Thaïs, located on the other side of the city, 3/4 of an hour from their current location. After all, the tourist wanted an Ikea. He had not specified which Ikea. And anyway, with his posh silk suit and his tie, he must be a wealthy Indian industrialist. Not likely to be short of a few bob, was he? Pleased with himself, Gustav quickly calculated how much money the journey would make him and rubbed his hands. Then he started the meter and set off. What an excellent way to begin the day. A fakir by trade, Agitachattru Oghash, pronounced a jar of rat stew oh gosh, had decided to travel incognito for his first trip to Europe. For this occasion, he had swapped his uniform, which consisted of a loincloth shaped like an enormous nappy, for a shiny grey suit and a tie rented for peanuts from Dailoa, pronounced Die Lawyer, an old man from the village who had, during his youth, been a representative for a famous brand of shampoo, and who still had an impressive head of greying hair. In choosing this disguise, which he was to wear for both days of his trip, the fakir had secretly wished to be taken for a wealthy Indian industrialist. So much so that he had forsaken wearing comfortable clothes, i.e. a tracksuit and sandals, for the 3-hour bus journey and a flight lasting 8 hours and 15 minutes. After all, pretending to be something he was not was his job. He was a fakir. He had kept only his turban for religious reasons. Beneath it, his hair kept growing and growing. It was now, he estimated, about 16 inches long, with a total population of 30,000, mostly germs and fleas. Getting into the taxi that day, Agitachattru, pronounced a cat in a batsuit, had immediately noticed that his peculiar get-up had produced the desired effect on the European, in spite of the tie, which neither he nor his cousin knew how to knot correctly, even after the perfectly clear but somewhat shaky explanations of Dailoa, who had Parkinson's. But obviously this was a minor detail, as it had gone unnoticed amid the overwhelming elegance of his attire. A glance in the rear-view mirror not being enough to contemplate such handsomeness, the Frenchman had actually turned round in his seat in order to better admire Agitachattru, making the bones in his neck crack as he did so, as if he were preparing for an act of contortionism. Ikea? Ikea. Lequel? What Ikea? The driver had stammered, apparently as comfortable speaking English as a holy cow on ice skates. Just Ikea, doesn't matter, the one that best suits you, you're the Parisian. Smiling, the driver had rubbed his hands before starting the engine. The Frenchman has taken the bait, thought Agitachattru, pronounced a jackal that ate you, with satisfaction. This new look was proving ideal for his mission. With a little luck, and if he didn't have to open his mouth too much, he might even pass for a native. Agitachattru was famous throughout Rajasthan for swallowing retractable swords, eating broken glass made from zero-calorie sugar, stabbing his arms with fake needles, and a heap of other conjuring tricks, the secrets of which were known only to him and his cousins, and which he was happy to label magical powers in order to bewitch the masses. So, when the time came to pay the bill for the taxi ride, which amounted to €98.45, our fakir handed over the only money he had for his entire trip. A counterfeit €100 note printed on just one side, while nonchalantly gesturing to the driver that he could keep the change. Just as the driver was sliding the note into his wallet, Agitachattru created a diversion by pointing at the huge yellow letters that proudly spelt out IKEA above the blue building. The gypsy looked up long enough for the fakir to pull nimbly on the invisible elastic that connected his little finger to the €100 note. A tenth of a second later, the money had returned to its original owner. "Oh, I almost forgot," said the driver, believing the note to be nestled safely within his wallet. "Let me give you my firm's card, in case you need a taxi for the way back. We have vans as well if you need. Believe me, even in flat-pack form, furniture takes up a lot of space." Gustav never knew if the Indian had understood any of what he had just told him. Rummaging in the glove compartment, he pulled out a laminated business card emblazoned with a flamenco dancer and handed it to him. "Merci," said the foreigner. When the red Mercedes of gypsy taxis had disappeared, although the fakir, who was only used to making small-eared Indian elephants disappear, could not claim to be responsible.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?